Thanks for joining me for this step-by-step video for the project called Ghoul Whip. I'm so glad you decided to paint with me. Let's get started. One of the first things we want to do is we want to get our background tissue paper. I used a black and orange Halloween buffalo plaid, and we want to decoupage that to our main surface. And so if you happen to purchase the buffalo plaid tissue paper from my website, you will find that you can actually get two of the two pieces, enough to do two projects out of this sheet. And trust me, you don't have to stick with the buffalo plaid. There are lots of other Halloween tissues out there that would look great on this background. So I'm going to use DecoArt's decoupage medium, and I use it a lot, so I like to keep it in this stainless steel container with a sealed lid. And what I'm going to do first is not use my good brush, that's for sure. And so with this pattern, I want to make sure that I get it straight. Okay, it's going to have wrinkles, but that's okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some decoupage to my surface. Now, this is really thin tissue paper. You don't need a whole lot. If you tend to do heavy decoupage on your surfaces, you may find that it's hard to put patterns on. Of course, this doesn't count in this one. We're not putting a pattern on this one. But in case you were doing it for something that you do put a pattern on, you want to use a light layer of decoupage, because it'll adhere just fine with a light layer. If it does get too much decoupage, it'll be kind of slick and you won't be able to apply your pattern. But if that happens, don't worry. You just want to take out your sanding block and sand the surface lightly. That is the decoupage surface, and that'll rough it up enough so that you can use it to apply your pattern. So anyway, I am going to apply this tissue paper to this background, and amazingly then I'll have one part of the design already done. So I'm going to do it just strips, layers at a time, okay? I'm not going to try to decoupage the whole thing and then lay the tissue on. And so I want to get that top done, and then I'm going to line up my paper very carefully. And I always like to leave a little hang off the edge, because I can come off back and just file it off with my emery board. And wrinkles are just fine. It's okay. They add character. And then I just pull this back and add another strip of decoupage medium down. I'm getting it up under there where it may have dried a little bit. And then I come back and smooth that onto that area. And I'm going to continue to do this all the way down the piece. So I've got the tissue paper decoupaged in place. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back with an emery board or a nail file. I just happen to have a little nail file here. And what I'll do is I'll take off the edges by just sanding around the edge like this. And I really want to let it dry first. But as you can see, it makes it come off nice and even against the edge. Alright, so I've filed off the excess tissue, and this is dry. So now what I want to do is I want to take a large flat brush and some lamp black. I want to blend it out really well, because I don't want it to be a line of lamp black. We already have that here on the sides. I want it to be a soft float of lamp black, and I'm just going to float lamp black around all 4 sides. And yep, it's going to kind of bead up a little bit because of the decoupage, but that's okay, it'll work just fine. Just kind of want to soften those edges. And I like to use a mop brush when I want to soften floats. So if you have a mop brush handy in your stash, get it out and give it a try. What I really want to do is I want to round these corners a little bit. So I'm going to walk that lamp black float out to kind of round that V area is what I like to do. So here we go. I'm going to go into another V area. So I'm going to walk that color out a little bit and round that corner. Let's go down the other long side. Still beads a little bit, but that's all right. It's doing what we want it to do, so I'm not going to complain too much. There are much better things to complain about than a little bit of beading, but I'm really liking how this is softening those hard corners. Luckily, we don't have to paint anything else on here. All right. I think I want to go down here and just hit this bottom edge once more. It seemed to not take too well. All right, there we go. And I just really like the way that softened that edge on that. So we are going to set this piece aside because we're basically done with it now. Wasn't that an easy step? And we're going to get out our next little rectangle. And this is the one that is going to have the cup that's going to be glued on top of it. So what I want to do is I want to paint this a nice bright color, and I'm thinking I want to go Irish moss. So I'm going to base coat this rectangle with Irish moss, and then we'll be back. Okay, I have the this smaller rectangle painted with Irish moss. It's just one coat because we're going to put so much stuff on top of it. You really don't need it to be completely opaque. And you'll find me saying that a lot in my packets and in other videos. Is you always want to consider what's going on top of this. Do I have to have 3 coats of the base color? And normally you don't because there's so much going on top of it. So now the next thing I'm going to do, I've sanded it lightly so I have a smooth surface. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Punchinello. You can see I've used it a few times. And I'm going to just fill up this background with some dots using Irish moss, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit with some warm white. And I like to use a cosmetic sponge to stencil with my Punchinello dots on. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up Irish moss on that wide end, and then I'm going to dip into my warm white and just lighten it up a little bit so I get a little bit lighter value of Irish moss. And I'm just going to add dots, and I'm going to cover this whole thing. So I'm going to change the direction that I hold my Punchinello just to vary the look a little bit, but just want to add some interest, of course, to the background here. So I'm just going to go around and add these dots, and they don't have to be opaque. Again, we have a piece that's going to command your attention, that's going to be sitting on top of it. So just keep reloading your little sponge or your stencil brush with that Irish Moss warm white mix and go around and stencil dots on the background. And you know me, I can't just leave a background blank. If there's a big wide background there, I'm going to fill it up with something. It's just what I do. It's one of my habits, my bad habits. See, this group is a little lighter, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I might be able to finish it off here. Sorry about my camera wiggling it. I get into this pouncing stuff. Okay, so now I also want to go and pick up just warm white. It's still going to have a little tint of green, and I'm just going to lighten up around the center area a little bit, kind of where I think that cup of pumpkin spice latte or whatever it is going to go. Just lightening it up. And I feel like I got this a little too light there, so I soften that up. Okay, so I've lightened up that center so that where my cup goes, it's going to stand out a little bit more. And I think I need to go up here a little bit, maybe out here. Yeah, just wherever. Okay, so that's really cool. Now we want this to dry, and then we're going to come back and we're going to float some shading around the 4 outside edges with black forest green. So I'm going to dry this and I'll be back. Alright, again with a large flat brush, we want to float some soft shading around these 4 edges with black forest green. So again, blend it out well so you get a nice soft float. And let's just deepen up those edges. Alright, I'm really liking that. It really kind of softens those edges again and kind of gives it an ethereal feeling. So there may be some detail lining that we do later, but I'm gonna look at the piece and figure that out later. Okay, we're gonna move on to this smaller rectangle that's gonna have the lettering on it, and I'm gonna go ahead and give that a coat of turquoise blue. Alright, so 1 coat of turquoise blue, and again I sanded it lightly, and since this is gonna have lettering on it, I'm not gonna do too much to the background because I want the lettering to stand out. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush highlighting through the center of this rectangle with some turquoise blue plus warm white, just a lighter value turquoise blue, just to highlight that center. And if you have a way that you like to dry brush, by all means use that. I'm going to give you a quick little demo of how I like to dry brush, and if you have troubles, you can always give it a try. That's all I ask. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I like to dry brush, and what I like to use is a Langnickel short round sable brush. This one's fairly new, so it still has a nice point. As I use it more for dry brushing, the point kind of wears down a little bit, and it will eventually end up to be kind of flat. But this is still a good brush to dry brush with. but I have a little bit larger area to work on, so I'm going to use the newer brush. And what I'm going to do is, the brush is dry, hence it's called dry brushing. And I'm going to pick up some warm white on my palette, and I'm just going to kind of wipe it and scrub it around. I'm working that color into the bristles a little bit. Okay, and I go in circular motions and I just work it around. And then I'm going to pick up a little turquoise blue, and I'm going to rub it and scrub it in that same area. Now, I'm not sure if that's light enough to suit me, so I'm going to pick up a little bit more warm white and lighten it up even a little bit more. So I've got quite a bit of paint, and I'm scrubbing it into the bristles of that brush. Okay? Still, no water. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my towel, and as you can see from my towel, I do this quite often. I'm going to wipe my brush out. And you're going to leave a lot of paint on your towel. And then what I like to do, and this isn't going to hurt you, it's non-toxic, but if you prefer not to do this, then I totally understand. I like to hit this area of my hand with the brush, and when I hit it, it's cold. And so I'm going to rub and kind of scrub that around until it's not cold anymore. It doesn't get hot, but it just loses that coolness. And that is an indicator to me that I've taken enough paint out of this brush that I can go to my piece. And I always enter this part of it with fingers crossed. But I want to scrub some of that lighter color that is in my brush. And you should have to scrub a little bit. If you go to your piece and you start scrubbing on and you get blobs and stuff, then you just need to wipe out your brush and get a little more paint out of it. But I'm having to scrub, and as you can see, this newer brush loses some bristles until I scrub it into submission, and it quits doing that. But I'm scrubbing and scrubbing and filling up that center area with this lighter value of true blue. I'm getting a little bit over here. And you see, there was a lot of paint in that brush, so I can use it for a long time. And now I think I want to lighten this up even just a little bit more. So I just go back to my palette and pick up some more warm white and rub it around on my palette, wipe it out on my towel, hit my hand again, and I can see I've got a lighter value now. There, it almost looks white, but it really does have a little bit of blue in it. And so I'm going to scrub until the coolness is gone, and then I'm going to just tickle this color. Well, not tickle, I'm going to scrub it, so it wouldn't really be a tickle. This color, this lighter value, through the center. And I think you can see that it's really kind of brightened that center area up a little bit. Alright, so then you can wash your brush out. You can finally get that brush wet. And set it aside to dry for the next time you need to dry brush. And then one of the next things we're going to do, again with that large flat brush, is we want to float shading around all four edges of this rectangle with true blue. Again, very well blended out. And when I talk about very well blended out, what I mean is, here's my true blue. I'm going to corner load, and I'm going to start blending on my palette. Now, normally when you are blending for a float, you kind of stay in the same line and move that paint across your brush. But when you want to soften that float a little bit, I like to walk away from that line. And as you can see, the blue is less intense as I walk away. So that means I'm softening it up quite a bit. Now I can always come back and blend back into it and pick up more paint. So that's what I mean when I say very well blended out. So again, we're just going to go around all four sides. And I'm again going to walk those corners, turn them, and make them a little more rounded. And across the top here. Let's see. I'm going to go down this other short side. And across the other long side. Alright, so that looks pretty good, and that will make a nice background for our lettering to be on. So the next thing we're going to work on is the cup cutout, and so you want to get your cup cut out and apply the pattern for the cup and the straw, and then we'll do some base painting there. Okay, I have the pattern on for the cup and the straw, although I'm going to paint the straw the same color as the ghost right now. So let's paint our ghost, including the straw, with warm white. One coat, 2 coats, depends on if you have water in your brush or not. And I want to paint the cup and the handle with a coat or 2 of graphite. So I will do that base painting, and then I will be back. I'm back, and I've painted my ghost and my straw with warm white. It took a couple coats, and I painted my cup with graphite. And since the ghost is the furthest back, I'm going to start working on him first. And so what I want to do first is I want to float some shading on my ghost. I put my pattern on, and I'm going to float some shading on my ghost. And now this can get a little tricky. I love to float my ghost with turquoise blue, but sometimes it's a little difficult to get the right look to the float. So what I've learned when I'm doing ghosts is, and I want to float with turquoise blue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load one corner of my brush with turquoise blue, and I'm going to load the other side with warm white, which is the color he was based in. And then I'm going to blend it a little bit on my palette, and that seems to help quite a bit with you to get a handle on that float. So I'm going to float with the turquoise blue, there. And if you like to mop out your floats, again, you could do that here, which really softens it and blends it back into the warm white that's in your brush. I'm also going to float here. So each of these little humps get a float of turquoise blue, your brush double loaded with warm white. And I'm gonna just ignore the candy cane right now, and if I get on it, I get on it. It's okay. Soften. Isn't that a beautiful, not that I'm bragging about myself, but it's just a nice float. Alright, and now I'm going to go to the other way, on the other sides. Same thing, turquoise blue on one side of your brush, warm white on the other. And you can always reload those corners as you need to. I find that I need to reload my warm white more often than my turquoise blue. And I'm going to do this other side. Let's see, almost loaded my brush with the wrong side. Okay, and let's go up and around the top of his head. Very happy with that. I'm also going to add some more white to my brush. I'm going to float across the ghost next to the cup. So I want to come here. I think I need a little more water in my brush. And here again, you can walk that color up a little bit into those corners. Don't worry if you get turquoise blue on your cup. Graphite will cover that up. Yep. Need a little more water. That float didn't move as nice as I'd like. I'm also going to float on the lower edge of the second section. And the lower edge of his head. I do also want to float the top of his head, so I need to add a little more paint to my brush. I'm just going to go across the top of his head. And I want to go next to the straw. I don't want to go under the straw, but I do want to go next to the straw. And the other side. Wiped out that, so I'm going to put some of that back in. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I think I want to just add a touch more color in here. I probably should obey my advice when I say, if you think you just want to add one more thing, don't. But that worked out okay. I want to come back with warm white and highlight the tops of the second and third sections, just to bring them back, bring that white back. So just a regular side load float, no double colors or anything. And I'm just going to highlight that top edge of the second and third layers. And that just kind of brightens them up a little bit. Makes them a little more crisp. I'm going to carry this across here. Alright, cool. Now he's got a couple little eyes. This ghost is relatively easy. And what I want to do is I want to take a liner brush and I'm going to thin down some turquoise blue and a touch of warm white for a lighter value. Turquoise blue, and a little lighter, and I'm going to thin it down, make it like a wash consistency. What I'm going to do is, if you've painted with me before, you've gone through this with me, I want to line a shadow above each eye. So what I'm going to do is, with that wash of turquoise blue and warm white, I want to start at one side of the eye on the point, and then as I come around the top of the eye, I flatten out and then I come back down to a point, just to give a little shadow above the eye to make it sink back into his head a little bit. So there, you got shadows above the eyes. I want to give him some nice cheeks. So I'm going to get some cactus flower and I'm going to dry brush some nice round cheeks on this little guy. They're kind of like right here under his eyes, so they're going to disappear into that second, oh, that would have been a good thing not to do, into that second layer. And you want to do this with the dry brush. So I just want to give him some little cheeks right here. Nice and soft. If you don't have cactus flower, just use a nice corally pink color, nice cheek color. You could use bright salmon. Let me see what else you could use. If you have coral blush still, you could use that. But you just want to give them a couple little cheeks. Now what we want to do is we're going to give our candy cane a coat of warm white just to clean it back up. You should still be able to see the pattern through it. I just want to cover up that blue just a little bit that I got on there. So I'm not even doing the whole thing, I'm just doing the part that has a little bit of blue on it and a little hair, just to clean it up a little bit. Right, we want to paint his two little eyes in with lamp black, and you paint them in completely, okay? So just paint in both eyes, nice little ovals with lamp black. Alright, so he has two little eyes. We want to let those dry, and then we're going to come back and add some color to them. So I'm going to take a liner brush and some Irish moss, and I'm going to paint two crescent shaped strokes in the bottom of each eye. I'm going to paint one in each eye, not two, but one in each eye. And I like to do this. I like to set this crescent stroke in the bottom of the eye, but not completely setting on the bottom edge. I leave a little rim of black around the bottom. So what I like to do first is add that bottom edge of that crescent stroke so that I can keep it from going all the way to the bottom. And then I just come and fill in. And one coat is enough. So just line the bottom edge of that stroke in, and then come back and fill in the rest. So he's got a couple little eyes. Okay, so now I'm going to line a highlight on that green stroke in his eyes, and it's going to be with Irish moss plus a little warm white, just to make a lighter value, again like we did when we added those dots to that rectangle. And all I'm going to do is line this lighter color in the center of each of those green strokes. The next thing I want to do is I want to take my liner brush and some thinned lamp black, and I want to give him some little eyelashes. And I just kind of scribble those on. They don't have to be perfect little eyelashes. Finally, what I want to do is I want to add some warm white highlights in the eye. So what I'm going to do is fill my liner brush with some warm white paint. No water is necessary. And I'm just going to add a dot of warm white in the top and a dot in the bottom of the black part of the eye. And then I'm just going to tap a little warm white on the center, very center of that green stroke. So I like to keep the dots in the same area. I don't switch sides here. So I'm going to go there, and then tap some warm white down the center of that green stroke. I think he needs a little nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to float his little nose on with 2 C strokes of cactus flower. And it's just a little oval, kind of between his eyes. So I do one side, and then I go back and do the other side. So he has a little nose. I think that gives him a little more character. We are going to move on to the straw. And what we want to do is we want to paint the stripes on the straw with burnt orange. So I'm going to paint those in, and I'll be right back. Okay, so my stripes are painted in with burnt orange. And I've gone ahead and dried the stripes. So what I want to do now, sorry, is drying my brush, is I want to dry brush a highlight through to the right of center on the straw with warm white. So dry brush, warm white, and we're just going to add that highlight to the left of center a little bit. So I'm just going to go right over the white stripes, over the orange stripes, and dry brush that little highlight. It kind of covers the whole thing, but you start out trying to keep it left of center. The next thing I want to do is I want to float shading on the outside edges with burnt orange. And again, blend this out really well. You want it to be a nice, soft orange float. So I'm going to go up one edge here. And I'm going to let that dry, or if you have a handy dandy dryer, you can dry that real quick. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. So the white stripes end up turning a little orange, but don't worry, we'll line a highlight back on them. Or maybe not, I kind of like that. And now we have one more float to do on these, and then a highlight. And what we're going to do is we are going to float on top of this burnt orange shading that we just did with some very well blended out true blue. You just need to corner load just a tiny bit, because you don't need a whole lot of color. And so I'm just going to go right on top of that orange float with a tiny, well blended out float of true blue. And that's going to go on both sides also. Okay, so we are going to line that highlight, and this is going to be right of center on this straw. So I just want to start here, go all the way down. I also want to set this straw a little bit further in front of the ghost. I almost said snowman because I said candy cane. So again, with a well blended out float of true blue, I'm going to float on the ghost next to the straw, just to pop it a little bit more on top. I want to mop that out. I'm going to do that on both sides also. And that just kind of sets that straw a little bit more forward. Alright, now we want to take our liner brush and some warm white, and we want to just kind of tap some warm white at the base of this straw to make it look like it's stuck into the ghost. So I just like to tap it in and kind of blend it back into the ghost a little bit, and that way it doesn't look like it just ends. It looks like it's actually stuck into the ghost. Alright, we're going to work on our cup next, so I'm going to back up a little bit. Our cup is based in graphite, so we are going to dry brush some highlighting on our cup with turquoise blue. I need to back up just a little bit more, and we are going to dry brush a highlight here on the left side, a little bit on the right bottom and the right top, and then on the handle with turquoise blue. And I'm going to even go into this area that's going to get checks. So, and this is going to be kind of a wide dry brush. Okay, it's already starting to make that cup look a little bit more round. I also want to dry brush a little bit on the bottom little edge here. So I also want to do on the handle. Just kind of scrub some of this color in there. I want to go in this lower right corner, so you've kind of done like a backwards J here. Brighten up this area a little bit, and then also just a little smidge here in the top. So it's almost a U, but not quite. Okay, I'm also going to pick up some warm white, and I'm going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight. So I've made a little bit lighter value of turquoise blue, and I'm just going to come back, and this is not going to cover as much area as the original dry brushed highlight did. It gets a little wider at the bottom, but not too much. A little bit in this corner, a little bit in the top, little bits on the handle, and across the bottom. Okay, so that's looking good. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some orange and green checks to the top edge of this cup. And so what I want to do is I want to tape off, just so I don't have to try to end them at the right place, or try to keep from getting it on my little ghost. So I'm going to tape off the top edge. Of the cup. And I did draw the pattern on for the checks, but I'm always if you have a little stripe stencil that you want to use, that would be great. I have this little stripe stencil that I'm going to use. And let's see, I always like to kind of center them. So I'm going to stencil on, and again I'm going to use my cosmetic sponge, but it's got green on it, so I'm just going to cut the green off. There, I have another, I can get another use out of it. So I'm going to stencil on the orange checks. Or you can paint on the orange checks, whichever you prefer, if you don't have a little stripe stencil. I do have this one on my website. It's really cheap. I think it's like 50 cents. And let's see, I'm going to add to the edge. There. Do I get a little bit more on this? Yeah. Alright, and then I'm going to snip the orange off my sponge. And I'm going to stencil green checks in between with Irish moss. Again, these don't have to be opaque. And there is a little bit of black left in there, and I kind of like that. So that's okay with me. Right. So now what I want to do is pull this tape off. Liking it. I'm going to let those dry, and then I'm going to come and dry brush some highlighting through them, and I think I'm going to pull in Moon Yellow to do that. Alright, so I'm going to dry brush a little bit of Moon Yellow highlighting through the center of that striped edge of the cup. Okay. So just a nice dry brush of Moon Yellow right through the center of those stripes. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to float shading on our cup, and we're going to do that with very well blended out lamp black. I want them to be nice soft floats of lamp black. So I'm going to start here on the handle next to the cup, down at the bottom, and I kind of walk that color out a little bit. I'm going to do the very bottom little base of the cup. I'm going to go on both outside edges. I want to go, and this I really want it blended out nice and soft. I want to go across this top edge, across the stripes. So I'm going to turn my cup a little bit, very softly. Add this float of lamp black across the top edge. And I want to mop that out and soften it. I'm going to float underneath the stripes with lamp black. I want to float along this inside edge of the handle. I'm going to float the top edge of the base. Right now. So just along the top edge. I'm going to go down both sides, and I am going to start on those checks. I'm going to turn my little guy over so I can get to the other side. And I also want to float along the bottom edge of the cup above the base. I said I needed some purple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my liner brush and some purple cow, and I'm just going to line in between each of those stripes with a thin little line of purple cow. Actually, it's going to be between the orange and the green, but not every between orange and green. So I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to skip an orange green and go here, skip here, skip here, here, here. Right. I'm going to pick up a little warm white, and I want to line a little highlight on each of those purple stripes I just did, right through the center. Alright, I'm liking that. Okay, one of the last things we're going to do to the cup is we are going to float like a reflective float on the edges of the cup and on the handle, and we do that with some very well blended out turquoise blue. So again, a nice soft float turquoise blue, and we're going to go down the side edge. And now when you do this, you stay just a hair off the actual edge. So this float kind of goes right next to the edge. I just need to get a little more color in there. Okay, there we go. And then I want to also do this little base. Again, staying off the edge a little bit. I'm going to come and do the other side. Do this little base. And I'm going to come and do this side of the cup. And a little more water. I think that adds a lot to the piece. And then I also want to do the outside edge of the handle. So I think I have better luck if I come at it from this way. Again, it's off the edge just a little bit. And I know that the cup looks plain right now, but don't forget we have that little oval to put on it. And so the next thing you want to do is you want to get that oval out, and you want to give it a coat or two of purple cow. Sand it lightly, and then go ahead and add the pattern for the pumpkin. Alright, base coated purple cow pattern on. What I want to do first is I want to dry brush some highlighting on the purple outside of the pumpkin with warm white. So I'm just going to add some warm white highlighting in the negative spaces around the pumpkin. I want to base my pumpkin in with burnt orange, and I'm going to go ahead and base in the stem with Irish moss. So I'll be back after that. Okay, so I've got my pumpkin based in and the stem. So the next thing I want to do is I want to float shading around the pumpkin and around the outside edge of the oval with lavender. So just get out a little bit of lavender. It's not going to take a lot. And we'll just float shading around our pumpkin and around the outside edge. Alright, so shading is done around my pumpkin. Now I'm going to work on the pumpkin itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush highlighting in each section of the pumpkin with moon yellow. So I'm going to go through the center of each section. So this center section is going to be a pretty wide dry brush. And then I want to do the side sections, which of course are smaller. We are going to float a highlight with moon yellow on the outside edges of each section. So blend it out kind of good. And I'm going to start on the outside section, and it's going to go on pretty bright, but it will tone down. As it dries, it just kind of softens a little bit. And then I'm going to go on the same side of the center section. And I'll just turn my pumpkin over and do the same thing to the other sections. Okay, so I'm going to soften that a little bit. So we are going to float shading on our pumpkin with country red. And it's going to go in the obvious places, which would be to separate the side sections from the center section. But there's also a few more places that I like to float this color. So I'm going to start off with the obvious. And I'm going to float on the side sections next to the center section, just to separate them. Turn this over and do the other side. Okay, I'm also going to float this color in the top of each section and in the bottom. So I treat each section as its own little float. I don't just go across the top. I kind of do like a C stroke. And I can fill up that top section a little bit. Let's go to this side. And yes, it goes over part of that highlight float you did, but it's okay. We're going to do the same thing in the bottom. Right, let's go ahead and float a moon yellow highlight on the left side of our stem while we let those country red floats dry. So I'm just going to do a little moon yellow highlight on that left side. Now you're going to get out burnt umber, which is another color we haven't had on our palette. Just a little. And everywhere that we floated country red before, we are going to go ahead and float with burnt umber. I also want to float burnt umber on the right side of the stem. I'll turn this guy back over and we'll add a little burnt umber shading on the right side of the stem. We want to come back and bump up the highlights a little bit in the tops and bottoms of each section with a dry brush of warm white. So just a little bump up there in the top here. Really does make a difference. And then I'm going to go in the bottoms just a little. Really makes a difference. Alright, so now what we have to do is we need to put the pattern for our lettering on our blue rectangle, and then when we come back we'll do some lettering. Alright, so I am totally going to cheat on this lettering, and I'm going to use a black paint pen. I have these on my website too. It's an extra fine point, so let's see how this goes for me. I'm finding that if you let up the pressure a little bit as you go around curves, it won't do this little splatter thing that I got. But I don't mind the splatter thing. It is a Halloween piece after all. I have to say, this is a way easier than trying to do it with a brush. Alright, cool. That was quick and easy lettering. Alright, now I feel like this needs something else. I think what I'm going to do is add an outline stripe. And so what I'm going to do is, again using my paint pen, I'm going to take my ruler and just add a stripe around the edges. So it is a paint pen, so you do want to let it dry before you lay anything on top of it. So I can do this side, but I'm going to lay off on the side edges for just a little bit. It doesn't take too long to dry. Okay. I think that dresses it up just nice. So I'll come back and do the side edges in just a minute, but I am going to go to my green rectangle and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a little stripe around the side edges. And again, I'm using my paint pen, which is making it super fast and easy to keep it straight. I've been using the white paint pen on things, but this is my first time to use the black one. And I'm just kind of eyeballing where I want the stripe to go. Which is probably a mistake, but it'll be okay. And I'm also going to go back to my checkered one and add a stripe around it. Because now that I'm doing all these stripes, I'm enjoying it. This one will kind of get lost in the black shading that we did around the edges, but I think it'll still add a nice touch to it. Alright, now my little pumpkin guy, since I can't use a ruler, I'm going to have to just do it by hand, but I'm going to add a little border line to this too with the black pen. So wish me luck. Just going to go, and I don't care if it's a little wiggly squiggly, it's okay with me. Again, another piece of character. In fact, I'm making it kind of a hit and miss line on purpose. Just so I don't have that pressure of it being a solid outline. Okay. Now, I think that this also needs something on the background, so I'm just going to take my paint pen and add some little black dots to that background. Just to, as usual, add a little more interest to this thing. There we go. Awesome. I think I can call it done on the paint pen here. So now the only thing left we have to do is, let me back up here, is glue our guys in place. So on my background piece, I want to position these things, and a ruler would be a nice touch. I think I have a nice one here. just to make sure that I'm not off by too much. So this needs to move over. It's about an inch border on each side of this green one, and the bottom is like a half an inch. So I got the bottom, and that looks good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chalk pencil and just add a little chalk pencil mark, so I can line this up again. So I'm going to get out my Gorilla Glue. Add some to the back, maybe. Never once had that gorilla come in here. And then carefully, without getting my fingers in it, because it does stick pretty good, and line that up with those little marks I made. So piece one is in place. And here again, this top one, you want to line it up a little bit easier now that you have the green piece on. And Gorilla Glue sets up pretty fast. Good. I think that looks good. Sounds good to you? Cool. Now I want to add my little ghost guy on here, and you just kind of want to center him on. Glue him in place. A little bit on the handle. I've got some on my fingers. It's stuck pretty good already. And then we just need to add our little oval with our pumpkin on it. Might need a new bottle. Didn't want to put it on upside down. That would not be good. Okay, so now the next thing you need to do is sign it and add your wire hanger and varnish it with a couple of coats of varnish, and you've got a cute little sign to hang up for Halloween. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for painting with me and experimenting with our black paint pen, and I hope to see you the next time I'm on Tole. Thanks so much.